When we think of Vigan today, we picture cobblestone streets, horse-drawn carriages, and well-preserved colonial houses. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most famous tourist destinations in the Philippines. But Vigan wasn't always like this. In fact, if you visited in the 1970s, you'd see something completely different. An abandoned, crumbling town that many locals had left behind. So what changed? And what role did Imelda Marcos play in all this? Let's deep dive into the real story of Vigan's transformation. Welcome to No Excess Baggage Deep Dives, where we go beyond the usual travel spots and uncover untold stories behind the places we visit. I'm Miko, and in this episode, we're deep diving into Vigan, its history, its transformations, and some of the things hidden beneath its picture-perfect image. So buckle up, because we're about to unpack the real story behind Did Imelda save Vigan? The story behind its transformation. In 1972, the year martial law was declared, Philippine movie icon Fernando Po Jr. or FPJ released the film Ang Alamat, a movie shot entirely in Vigan, Ilocos Sur, FPJ's favorite shooting locale. According to the Philippine Film Archives synopsis, quote, "This is the third collaboration between the directors Celso Ad Castillo and Po, who stars as a reluctant hero that battles a whole private army by himself to defend his town." End quote. According to Melcor's Cineplex blog, the movie was about a World War II veteran played by FPJ who assumed the identity of his fellow soldier who died in the war as a father to the latter's son who did not know him personally since birth. As the protagonist in the movie, he became the hero who saved the townspeople from an abusive landlord who betrayed the farmers. The final scenes of a shootout between the hero and the villain were shot along the streets of Vigan. Within the same time period this movie was shot, Vigan became a hotspot for violence as two political families clashed for dominance. Filipino anthropologist and art historian Fernando Nakpil Zialcita, who heads the Cultural Heritage Studies program at the Ateneo de Manila University, shared his experience in an interview with Blueprint magazine in 2018. In the late 70s, I would pass there on my way to Ilocos Norte for my thesis. It was horrible and dark at night. I remember we stayed at a friend's hotel, and to walk to the plaza was scary because the streets were dark. Vigan was two-thirds empty at this time. Of course, the warfare between Singson and Crisologo is another reason why many residents moved out. The battle between warlords. There were no tourists in Vigan at that time. In other words, the Vigan we know now was very different from the Vigan during the Marcos regime. Zialcita further said in this interview that Filipinos at that time were afraid of old houses as they brought bad luck. Similarly, in a post written by Arkitekturang Filipino on Facebook, quote, "Most of the colonial stone and brick houses in its main district were abandoned, crumbling, and neglected. There were threats to these structures in the form of demolition and extensive remodeling." By the mid-70s, things were about to change. The Vigan Restoration Foundation was established as part of Ferdinand Marcos's cultural revivalism under the New Society or Bagong Lipunan. And the influential person who would spearhead the restoration project? Imelda Marcos, who was appointed as chairman of the National Parks Development Committee through her husband's Executive Order Number 3, dated January 5, 1966. Arnold Molina Azurin, a poet and essayist born in Vigan in 1946, mentioned in his piece Vigan, A Journey Through the Heartland, that the old town, quote, became a tool in the cultural revivalism of the dictatorship of former President Ferdinand Marcos, end quote. Imelda's brand of restoration, though, as Arkitekturang Filipino wrote, was the, quote, whitewashing of the Vigan houses whose exterior were originally and historically painted in pastel hues, end quote. A forum thread on Flickr back in 2009 talked about this in detail. One post said that Imelda Marcos's inspiration behind the whitewashing was the colonial towns in Spain. Another post shared that older Bigueños recall a time when the houses were painted in different colors, mostly pastel yellow. Zalcita, too, had something interesting to say about this. He confirmed that the houses were not gray or white in the past. They were actually multicolored. There were houses that were indigo, blue, mustard yellow, like in Mexico. End quote. In a 1999 article from the New York Times, Luis Acosta, then the vice president of the Save Vigan Ancestral Homes Association, sat down with Catherine Tanco of the International Herald Tribune. He also said that the entire town was whitewashed. Quote, but Vigan was never white. Even today you can see the old colors underneath. End quote. Acosta pointed at the faint colors of blue and yellow peeling under the white paint. When asked about the presumption that Imelda Marcos promoted Vigan during her stint as First Lady, Zalcita clarified that it was only Crisologo Street, not the whole town, that got government support. Quote, they paved it, but the cobblestones were fake. They paved in such a way that even the drainage was wrong. Typically, in old towns, the drainage runs in the middle, not on the sides, so it actually worsened the flooding. What happens is the water ran on the sides, which is actually bad for the houses. End quote. He also added that to make the houses look older, plaster was deliberately removed. He recalled a conversation he had with a Bigueño who said he would have his house deliberately chip off the plaster when he had the money. Acosta echoed the same sentiments that Zalcita pointed out. Quote, Crisologo Street was covered in flagstones to give it a cobbled look, even though such stones had never been used in Vigan. They even wanted the shop owners to wear period dress. But that's not what preservation is about. End quote. So, is Vigan just a case of stylized restoration or historical whitewashing? It's amazing how Vigan evolved from a neglected town into a world-renowned tourist destination. In fact, it's regarded as one of the best examples of Spanish colonial heritage in the Philippines. But Vigan is more than that. Azurin's essay captures the real Vigan behind the colonial mask. Quote, obviously, there's much more than meets the eye of transients and passers-by, even as they revel in the facts and colonial vintage scenery. It is myopic and naive to reduce a people's heritage to brick, wood, stone structures while utterly disregarding the beliefs, traditions, and self-destiny, what is often called the soul of a community. End quote. Vigan already existed even before the Spanish colonizers arrived. It gave birth to national heroes like Padre Jose Burgos and Gabriela Silang. It is more than just the whitewashed colonial town we see today. Older Bigueños recall a time when Vigan had houses painted in pastel hues, similar to those colorful towns in Mexico and Latin America. I think it would be lovely to see Vigan in that way too. That's it for this episode of No Excess Baggage Deep Dives. If you enjoyed this journey through Vigan, make sure to follow the podcast for more deep dives into history, culture, and hidden layers of the places we think we know. You can also check out my travel stories at noexcessbaggage.com.